Please remain seated. The show will begin in 3, 2...
Like a Hellcat. For more awesome content, like and subscribe now.
On a dreary autumn night in 1993, I was 47 years old, working another graveyard shift as a nurse at the local mental hospital in my town. My name is Sophia, and for 22 years, I dedicated my life to helping the sick. I often frequented the front desk and arranged appointments over the phone. I typically worked 6 days during the week, and the usual routine consisted of me patrolling the halls and checking on the patients. The hospital was rather large and had a total of 8 floors. We had a number of 50 patients, and some of them were critically ill. After thorough examinations, the doctor on duty by the name of Harold Matthews diagnosed them to be schizophrenic, despite the protests from the staff that claimed there was no concrete evidence in the lab test results to suggest they were. It was also alleged that the doctor fabricated the results and other documentation in order for the hospital to collect an excessive amount of money from the patients and their families. Matthews ran that place like his own personal get-rich-quick scheme, and I even believed he was deliberately trying to falsify reports just so he could fill his wallet. But nobody could prove Matthews was guilty in a court of law, and any time I seen him pass me by in the hall, it absolutely made me sick to my stomach how he still had his medical license. Anyway, I was sitting at my station, and I had just drank my second cup of hot coffee while I typed at my computer. I submitted paperwork to my superior, and with my clipboard in hand, along with a pen, I started roaming the first hallway to inspect some sleeping patients. I examined them closely to see if there were any irregularities, and took some notes. So far, everything was normal, and I quietly shut the door to the first wing behind me, before proceeding to the next. I will note, I was the only person on staff in the entire building around this time, and every night without fail I completed a shift. I eventually proceeded to the 5th floor, and then I heard the elevator doors behind me make the ding sound as they slid open, and I turned to see nothing but the inside of the elevator being engulfed in total darkness. When I called out under the assumption that a patient had somehow escaped their room, nobody exited the elevator, and I just stood there, gobsmacked. The elevator had then closed. I just continued walking, wanting to play it off like I was hallucinating. I then went to each and every room on that floor, and before I could exit the final room, as I spun on my heel, I felt a rush of freezing cold air run up my spine and violently tug my ponytail. I flinched, startled, and gasped loudly, staggering forward as I jerked my body to break free. I then was shoved and had dropped my items when I collapsed. I landed on my left side, and in my mind, I am thinking that somebody didn't want me to be there. I know while writing this I sound a little insane, but somebody or something laid their hands on me, and the scary part is, I couldn't see who or what it was, but I could feel the intense aura in the air, the heaviness that weighed down on me. I had to keep moving. I slowly rose to my feet and leaned down to grab my clipboard and pen before hurrying along. The soles of my sneakers squeaked a bit against the tile floor, and after several minutes of me walking, making my way to another set of double doors, I heard the sound of high-heeled shoes tap rhythmically in small fluid strides toward me. I then heard something else that made me stop in my tracks. It was a woman singing, and it was a familiar tune, which was "Hush, Little Baby." I was perplexed, listening as the voice got louder and louder, which echoed bouncing off of the walls. I wanted to run, but my legs couldn't move. My heart leaped into my chest when a gurney on the opposite side of the hallway had started rolling, the wheels turning so fast that the gurney practically sped my way. I quickly jumped off to the side as the gurney nearly crashed into me, and it hit the left wall opposite from me, shattering a picture glass now everywhere. I then ran as the high-heeled shoes from before started up again and began chasing me. As I'm scurrying down another hallway full of empty hospital wings, I hear heavy objects getting knocked down, cabinets full of glass jars and bottles toppling over, and more glass shattering. Some doors started opening and slamming shut by themselves. All of a sudden, at the end of that hallway, there were two elderly people in hospital gowns, just standing there and looking at me. I was horrified as I could see that they were transparent, and they let out this awful wail for 5 minutes, and the wailing was so powerful that it was like a gust of wind that seeped in and swept me off my feet. It knocked me down and I landed on my back. The high-heeled shoes aggressively got closer to me, and I got up once again, staggering with my clipboard and pen. I then got to a door which led me to 3 flights of stairs. One flight led to the 6th floor, another led to the 7th, and the 8th led to the rooftop. Those sections of the hospital were vacant and were only used to store extra medicine and supplies. I hid on the 7th floor behind some large boxes as the footsteps stopped near me. I held my breath and waited till the footsteps went the opposite way and soon faded. For the remainder of my shift, I stayed in that spot until I found the courage to take the back exit door on the 3rd floor in the break room, after gathering my stuff and clocking out. I stood on the front steps outside the mental hospital till I saw the other nurse, who pulled up in the parking lot. Her name was Joyce, and she was a little older than me. She noticed how frightened I was and asked me what was wrong. I reluctantly told her, and I could see that she turned pale. Joyce then asked me in a shaky tone of voice, "Have you seen her?" I shook my head and then responded with no. I said, "Who are you talking about?" She then whispered, "The bloody nurse." Joyce muttered, "Nurse Crimson." I shuddered. "Who is Nurse Crimson?" I asked. Joyce's eyes shifted around uncomfortably. "I'll be on shift with you tomorrow night," she said. "I'll tell you then. I'm so sorry that you went through this. I didn't think she'd come after you." I tried to get more answers out of her, but she just insisted on waiting for tomorrow night and ran inside. I went over to my car and drove home. The next night, I met Joyce at 5 o'clock when the other staff had left, and we had a conversation. We ate our sandwiches and drank bottles of water as she went on to tell me the story of Mary Ann Smith, aka the Bloody Nurse. It went something like this. "A decade before, you worked at the hospital. The year was 1961, Joyce had told me. Mary Ann Smith was relatively new as she had only been working here for about a month. She was 28 and many adored her, but nobody was more emotionally attached than Dr. Matthews. Mary Ann, however, wasn't interested in anything outside of a professional relationship. It was rumored that when Mary Ann had done her normal rounds at night, Dr. Matthews, who apparently always had some excuse to stay late past his shift, would always follow her to every room, and he tried to force himself on her. Sometimes he actually succeeded, and eventually Mary Ann discovered she was pregnant. She kept it a secret and hatched a plan to expose him. You see, Dr. Matthews is a highly respected and credible man in the eyes of his colleagues and his family. Having lots of money can buy yourself out of trouble if you got the right people to back you and the resources to do it. Mary Ann did her best to tread carefully, was going to find a way to break into his office and steal evidence that showed he did unethical practices. I would know this because she revealed only to me that she could take him down. I foolishly let her go alone, but I thought she could come out of this. No harm, no foul. I was wrong. I should have been there to protect her. I was her only close friend. I believe that Matthews hurt her. That night, She had gone into this building to retrieve those files from Matthew's office. Marianne was found dead. She was lying on the pavement, having been pushed off the roof or either had jumped herself, as some people claimed. I knew then, as I know now, she didn't go over that edge willingly. She was most definitely pushed. She was a bloody mess when the cops arrived. Matthews at some point knew she was going to have his baby and he got scared. He'd lose everything. So he paid off the cops to falsify a report, ruling her death as a suicide, and had the coroner not add in the part where her unborn child had died upon impact. It was all swept under the rug. Rumors spread about Marianne being a whore, and she was accused of poisoning her own patients. This went on even after she died. So ever since she passed, anyone who's worked a graveyard shift has claimed to hear Marianne roaming the halls and singing Hush Little Baby. And a majority of them were other nurses who picked on her, wrongfully accused her of awful things, and pulled mean pranks to torment her. And they were paid extra by Dr. Matthews to keep the poor woman in line. I saw all of this and tried to stop it, but I was forced into silence because Matthews said he'd find a way to ruin me and hurt my husband and children. Now, there were 18 casualties reported within 6 months after Marianne died, and it drove any of the surviving nurses mad who participated in the bullying. The nurses who were slaughtered had been brutally stabbed, and it is even said that Madeline was possessing some of them to finish the executions. 5 nurses were sent to prison for murder, and some had night terrors and died of heart attacks. I was mortified. I was utterly speechless. She then said, "The only chance Marianne has now to rest in peace is possibly getting revenge on her killer." I then said, "I could get the evidence," I suggested, "and expose Dr. Matthews, make sure he's stripped of his license." Joyce shook her head. "Don't," she said. "It's too risky. Matthews is even too smart for me, and he has his methods." Then what? I resign and pretend none of this happened? Your life is more important than this job. You've been here 22 years, transferred to another hospital. For your own sake and mine, do it. But trust me, it's not safe for you here. When Dr. Matthews came out of retirement and returned to this hospital just a year ago, he triggered this activity, angered Marianne's ghost. Karma will come for him. This isn't your battle to fight. But what if she needs our help? Think about it. I'm not actually a threat. She probably just doesn't want to open up yet, and it's because she doesn't completely trust that I'm the person who can. And you're her friend. Don't you want to see Matthews pay for what he did?" Joyce then looked at me sadly and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't compromise the safety of my husband and children." With that, she got up and left the break room. I then made the decision that I would handle this on my own.